Here we are. Ladies and gentlemen,
All right.
I'm here with G.A. Sola from the channel Guardian Angel 1, and we're here to talk about morality, broadly speaking, and the foundations of morality. So, G.A., introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to talk with you again after last time. And yeah, I run a small channel called, like you said, Guardian Angel 1. Guardian Angel 1 because I have a second channel called Guardian Angel 2 where I post an animation series that I'm working on. And Guardian Angel 1, it's more an educational channel where I create educational series. So yeah, and maybe how we uh, got on this is because we had conversations and we decided to talk about morality in more detail. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
That's great, exactly. Okay, so without further ado, we can start talking about it. So, just to get some very basic stuff out of the way, how would you give like a brief definition of morality in your eyes?
Right. A brief definition of morality, the way that I see it and the way that I would apply it most of the time is, well, before I give the definition, perhaps it's good for me to explain something that I believe that morality in general tends to be situational in some cases. I believe that even though you may have a framework that generally you try to be consistent with and so on, I believe that there are situations, it's not something that is overall 100% always going to be the case in under certain situations. So that's one thing. But the way that I practically either personally or the way that I would view morality for how I think it should uh, either be viewed or practiced is actions that are good or bad, or actions that can create or uh, basically the effects that the your actions will have on other sentient beings, other beings that can feel that are sentient, that can feel pain, pleasure, that can suffer, basically, most importantly. And so the effects that your actions or the intention of your actions or what your actions may cause is how I would define it. So basically, um if you know that punching someone in the face will cause them some suffering, if there is no necessity or if there is no situation that compels you or that where a greater good cannot be, derived in a different way, then morally, it's you should not punch them in the face. So that's just an example.
Okay, so from what I understand, I think this is like a very common sense view of morality. This is what most people would describe as like the moral sphere, let's say. So it is somehow integrally connected to suffering and uh, like pleasure or sensations of sentient beings and like mental states, basically. But uh, I think I have a bit of a problem with that, and I'm not entirely sure. So the first part of your definition, I find very correct. Like I agree with it completely. But I think the second part, and I will explain what I mean. The second part of the definition
Mm.
seems to be adding content without justification. Uh, so here's what I mean. So at first you said morality is about doing good or bad things, right? So that's a sort of formal definition of morality because it only provides a form. It says the good is that which is good. So it's almost a
Yeah, sort
yeah.
of.
So basically,
Mm.
what we're saying is that morality is that which speaks to the things that should happen, maybe something like that.
Something like that. Mm.
Yeah, um, but I'm not entirely sure how that's necessarily connected to sentient beings or pleasure and suffering. And I mentioned this when we talked about antinatalism last time as well. That basically morality is either the rules or the the duties or whatever it is that is guiding you in your way of behaving. But I don't see how that has to be related to the mental states of beings.
Hmm. So maybe I should. There are two corrections or clarifications. The first one is when you said that. Okay, let me maybe rephrase my first part. It is not necessarily the actions that are good. You should do good things because they are good. You should do things, take actions, and make decisions that may lead to good results, basically. And I know that some people will frame this as, well, if you take it further, then the end justifies the means. You're trying to get to a certain goal. And of course, we can talk a bit more about that. But generally, in day-to-day actions, the action itself, I do not believe that the action itself is intrinsically or inherently good. Uh, uh, Walking, I don't know, getting out of the house to go and help somebody may be getting out of the house is an action, right? What you're doing it for is what makes it good or bad. If you're getting out of the house to go and, I don't know, kill somebody, then that's obviously
Mm-hmm.
not a good thing if you're getting out of the house. So I know that's a weird example, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, yeah, the second part is when you're saying that, oh yeah, how you don't understand how it correlates to sentient beings, because those actions will have, if those actions have no effect on a sentient being, then I would consider it amoral, not immoral, amoral with an A at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beginning. In other words, it doesn't have to, yeah, it doesn't have to do with morality. So, you know, tossing a rock up in the air, catching it again, it's an action, didn't hurt anybody, didn't do anything, at least as far as we know. So it's amoral. Where sentient beings come in is you kind of use morality as a guide to determine how it will affect those sentient beings. If it affects them in a positive way, when I let me avoid saying positive way. If it affects them in a way that will cause them harm or some sorts of, like you said, mental or discomfort or distress, then the action in that situation becomes immoral or bad, not good morals. And if it's good for them or whatever, then it's good
Mm-hmm.
morals. It's a good action.
Okay. Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a sort of consequentialist viewpoint. So basically, the consequences of an action, of your actions, determines whether they are moral or not. But I still want to probe even at the foundation of that. Are you aware of the principle of how is it called? The principle of utility, if I'm not mistaken, which basically says that,
If you can remind me.
yeah. So I might be getting the title wrong, but it's basically the principle which says that good equals that which causes pleasure, bad equals that which causes pain. So basically, when we say that something is good, we intrinsically, like within the nature of good, what we mean is something that causes a positive mental state. So would you say that it's sort of a matter of definition? Because to me, that even that needs explaining, because there is something different between saying good in the sense of, well, something made me feel good, like I don't know, drinking wine makes me feel good because I like wine. There's something different between saying that and saying like something is morally good. There's a difference there.
Right. Oh, of course, yeah. That's actually a very interesting point. So the wait, actually, can you repeat because I was going to answer something else before you gave the example. Can you repeat the question basically to clarify?
Yeah. So basically, are you saying that there is a sort of, are you agreeing with a kind of principle which says that moral goodness is the same as pleasure, basically? Like the morally
Oh,
good,
yeah, yeah.
like morally good consequences, are morally good consequences the exact same thing as basically pleasure or good feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, yeah. So that's what I found interesting. I don't particularly take that stance. In fact, my view of morality has more to do with the avoidance of suffering or trying to. Uh, I know when people say maximize well-being, they usually are referring to pleasure, but I don't really see it that way. In the sense that getting someone a Lamborghini, for example, is probably going to make a person who wants such a thing feel good about it. I don't think that, however, will imply that there is some obligation to do so if you can and everything. Like, it would be immoral for you not to get them a Lamborghini and
Yeah.
maybe get them a different type of car. Something like I don't see it that
Yeah,
way.
it
I see
sounds strange.
morality more. Yeah, 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 exactly. No, so basically, I don't see it that way. What I see it as is if you're in a situation, I focus more on suffering, to be very honest, because I think that feelings of pleasure are very subjective, which is why if I may just give this example, um, which is why, for example, in Christianity, you'll find that people tend to focus more on hell than on heaven, because and they actually describe hell more than heaven, because generally suffering can be very, I would say, universal in a way, even though it's not entirely universal. But what causes people pain tends to be humans. What tends to cause human beings, sentient beings, pain or discomforts tends to be quite more or less universal. Let's just go with that. It's not universal, but let's just go with more or less. But what causes them pleasure is completely like it's much more subjective. In a sense, we there are many things that we can have in common that we can find pleasurable, but it's not it's much less clear. So basically, my view is that I don't really define it as something that which is something is good because it causes pleasure. Uh, I think in your definition, you may wanted to have said that it's something that may also deprive someone of harm or like the absence of harm. Is that also what you meant?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
if that
sure,
is
sure.
the case,
It's
then
both of those things are
mhm,
like consequentialist views. They're sort of
yes,
utilitarian and in nature.
yes. So basically, I would focus more on the parts uh, uh, if someone is in a bad situation or if someone it has the potential to feel some sort of harm or not something that's not good, such as a hungry person. If a person is hungry, they are. It's not that it's something natural that happens, but if basically to have to do something good like giving them food is a good act, of course. Not giving them food, however, would of course depend on the circumstance. I mean, if there's someone starving in a faraway country, I might be in a position to help them, but if I don't, it might be less of I would say less of a strain on me to say that no, you did an immoral act by not providing for that person because it's not very easily within my means.
Hmm.
But I would say that if a person is, I would say that, for example, a parent or someone that is in a better position or maybe has some sort of obligation or some sort of position to help better, it would be seen as a little more in line with the way I see morality. Yes,
Okay, so there are a lot of
to
things.
deprive them of that harm.
Yeah, okay, okay. A lot of things there to talk about. So, first of all, interestingly enough, I think it was Nozick, Robert Nozick, who said that basically we are all immoral because we can almost all donate a significant amount of money to organizations that actually help people who are starving. So, essentially, it is something that we can do, and yet people seem to not think about it as an obligation that should be upon us. But I think actually it's quite plausible to say, well, we can help. Actually, there are many organizations that will
Mhm.
take our money, and so if we are truly obligated to help people avoid suffering, then I guess we would be obligated to help those organizations.
In a way, of course, there are many other factors that come into play with organizations and helping people in a more indirect manner. I mean, for example, we have a limited amount of means to help people
Yeah.
in monetary means. I may want to help everybody, and personally, I do, but I would need to be, I think that it would actually be wiser to think about what you can do in the best way. I actually think that it may be even a little bit, you know, questionable if you just start randomly giving money because you may actually do more harm than good in such a situation.
Okay. So now about the difference between the suffering and the pleasure. Uh, this is something that I find particularly interesting because there is a sort of new wave of people being what I would call negative utilitarians. So essentially, people who think that the avoidance of suffering is more important, at least more important than the acquiring of positive pleasure. Um,
Right.
yeah. But I see some problems here. So, for example, you said that the things that cause pleasure are kind of subjective, whereas the things that cause suffering seem to be more universal. But surely the experience of pleasure and the experience of suffering are both universal. So, even though the ways in which we um, come to feel pleasure and come to feel suffering may be different, so we take different roads to go there, the destination itself, like the qualitative facts about um, pleasure and suffering, are both universal. So I don't see how the fact that we arrive at them from different destinations make makes one of them more important than the other, if that's what you were saying, because maybe I'm misrepresenting it.
Not necessarily. Excuse me. Not necessarily that we're arriving at it from different angles. I would see it in this way that basically to please people. I would say, just like the example of giving something to someone that's far away, the obligation, rather I would say that there's more obligation to not bring someone to do something that will actively cause someone harm than there is obligation to increase someone else's pleasure. I don't think that in my the way that I see things, I don't think that people uh, do something immoral by not increasing someone else's pleasure. I think the way that I see it, I think if you want to call it negative utilitarianism, I'm not saying that I subscribe to that because I don't really know if everything
Yeah,
about it, but I would go with that. Yeah, I would go with what you just said now. That I think that the focus should rather be on not actively causing harm or trying to alleviate harm from people rather than increasing people's pleasure. That's kind of how I see it, yeah. Because I think because I one there's because of the obligation factor of it. I think that well when I say obligation, I know that it can it's a bit loaded because it can mean a lot of things. Who gives the obligation? Why should we be
yeah.
obligated? But
We will talk
when
about
I say
obligation in
obligation,
a while. Yeah,
mm,
yeah.
okay, because yeah, but when I say obligation, I mean you're in a whenever I speak about obligation, I'm mostly referring to it in the sense of not you don't really need be obligated to increase someone else's pleasure in the sense to be a moral person
Mm-hmm.
more than you need to not, in other words, not cause other people harm. So I focus more on that because, like I said, the increasing someone else's pleasure not only is it subjective, but we don't even that may also cause harm to other people. It's also very it's not very clear how and why that needs to be necessary. Of course, you can do both at the same time. For example, if you are sending aid to somebody, not only are you preventing them from dying, which is or preventing them from starving, which is prevent alleviating the suffering, but you're also doing something good at the same time. But I think that the focus and my primary objective is the negative parts to avoid them from suffering.
All right. Well, a question I would have about that is sort of the epistemology behind it. So, how do you come
Mm.
to sort of know that, you know, you have an obligation to prevent suffering, but not an obligation to uh, actively create happiness? Because if we think about it purely logically, you could make certainly the case that they are sort of the two sides of the same coin, and
Hmm.
that qualitatively they shouldn't be treated differently. Perhaps our common perceptions of them are kind of different because we're obviously biased against death. So whenever something is negative, we're like super aware of its negativity, whereas when something is positive, we're not that aware of it. But I don't see how you come to know that the nature of pleasure itself, like it is less heavy or less important
Mm-mm.
in the moral context. So an example I could give is, let's say, um, okay, so I brought this example when I talked to Lawrence Anton as well. Of like, imagine you had, um, okay, so imagine a person. There was the family of Einstein, right? So right before he was born or whatever. Okay, so theoretically, by allowing Einstein to live and to grow up in the way that he did in an academic environment and stuff like that, it brings not only to himself but to many other people like pleasure or happiness, let's say, because we are moving forward in science, we're gaining knowledge, and that's a sort of pleasure that we have about gaining more knowledge about the world and stuff like that. So presumably, uh, if by not giving birth to Einstein, you prevented a bunch of harm, because obviously Einstein will be born and he will have a bunch of suffering in his life, just like everyone else. Presumably, if avoiding suffering is like always more important than causing pleasure, then it would be moral to not allow the birth to happen. But I
Mm.
think just intuitively, most people would disagree with that. Like surely
Mm.
there is some kind of pleasures, some kinds of pleasures, or some kinds of happiness is
Good.
that are
Yeah.
more important,
Mm.
or like just as important as suffering in some cases. So, what do you think about that?
I think that that is a good concern, especially with the fact that, like you said, most people would intuitively think that it's worth going through the suffering, despite that, because that's what we're used to, and that's also because we have a bias in towards existence because we do exist. People cannot really imagine n non-existence. They can't imagine the person not being there. Like, for example, do you have siblings? If you have any,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
not mention
I
them.
have two siblings. Yes.
All right. So imagine you have two. So you can't really imagine having not having the third sibling because they don't exist. There's nothing to talk about, you see. So that's a difference between existence and non-existence. So that's why I think there's that bias there. But in the example, for example, with Einstein, there is no guarantee that nobody had the idea. I don't know if your example would kind of put in
Yeah,
the
yeah. It's
caveat that we
only
knew.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
It's a hypothetical
Mm.
example. So let's say we
Okay.
knew that this child would turn out to be Einstein and he would make all these great discoveries and stuff like that. So we knew
Mm.
all of that, and also because again the birth thing is a bit weird because we're getting into antinatalism there, and that's a different discussion, you know. But maybe a different example, like a different way of putting this example, would be uh, what if you had the chance to put an anesthetic on the baby Einstein, and there would be no pain inflicted, and you know the family wouldn't feel any pain. Of course, that's implausible in the real world, but if you could do it in a way that nobody felt uh, any pain from that procedure, should you do it?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confused look I had. My earphones for some reason disconnected. Oh, I think it's because my second computer activated, so I tried to connect to the. I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
Can you still hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Did you listen to what I
Okay,
said, or
wonderful.
should I say it again?
No, no, no. I got it. You just correct me if I left something out, but I heard what you said. Basically, that with the caveat that we know that it will bring some good.
Yeah.
So basically, sorry. Basically, in such a there are a few ways to kind of answer that. Firstly, that if all people kind of strive towards the idea of not bringing that of people into the world, we might not even need scientific advances. Of course, there will be the question of the final generation, basically, of the people who will be left behind. They will likely suffer the most out of anybody because, you know, with a reduced number of people, many services will not work in society and so on and so forth. But I don't think that people should I know that the idea of bringing someone, we could possibly bring someone new to kind of fix certain problems or they can do a lot of good for the world, seems like a good thing. Like, because we have seen examples of one person uh, doing impacting the world in a great way. However, I think that the question should be more on why do we not have people like that who are living today? Why do we not use, or if we want to use, because essentially if we bring someone into the world with that hope, we are essentially using them to try to get that ends or that means. Um, why not have someone who is already existing kind of strive towards that goal? I know that maybe the question would then be that, well, with the more people that we have, then there are more chances of of that actually happening. But I don't think that. I think that to me that seems a bit like a way of kind of bringing people in. Almost, I don't want to use the word slavery, but I would rather use. I would say that it's a way of kind of bring people in, hoping for the sole purpose, or not for the sole purpose, but for in the hopes that they will do something for the world and for people, despite the fact that they will suffer. And in the anti-natalist viewpoints, which I do hold anti-natalist views in a certain way, that's not worth it. I don't think that it's worth it to bring a person who will suffer like that willingly into it. But I do also kind of see what you're saying, because if the person does live and they are happy to live and they are happy to bring, like, let's say Einstein, he's happy to be there and he's happy to kind of bring these inventions and ideas into the world, then it becomes a bit questionable. Like, oh, well, he seems fine. I mean, he suffers, but he seems to be doing well. But that goes again with the thing in a practical sense. We really do not have any guarantee. Einstein could have been born with no legs and no arms. He could have been born with a debilitating
Yeah. In
problem that
reality,
he'll
yeah.
absolutely.
In reality, we have no guarantees. Of course, that was just a hypothetical scenario.
But so if in the hypothetical, however, because I don't think I answered you correctly, in the hypothetical that we did have, and he would end up that way, and we knew that he would, I think that it would. The problem then, I suppose, would be the matter of the choice of the child, Einstein's choice, basically. If there was a way that we could, in that hypothetical, if there was a way that we could ask him that, present him with his life in front of him, tell him that we know this is how he will turn out, and he made the choice to come into the world despite what we've just told him, then there would be no moral dilemma there, because
Yeah, but
he made that choice.
wouldn't he make the choice though? I mean, if you were given the choice to live the life of Einstein, realistically speaking, you would probably say, "Yeah, I'll definitely live that." Although, again, I don't think this is a very coherent thing to say, because I don't think you could ask. I don't think to say that you can ask someone whether they want to exist or not is a coherent thing to say. But anyway, I don't really want to delve into antinatalism. I want to delve into the principle at hand, the principle within morality. So here is where I have a bit of an issue. You said that, for example, we have a sort of inbuilt bias towards existing, right? So, okay, so we have this bias towards existing. And yes, we do. But how is our bias against pain any different to that bias? So, for example, you said that foundationally speaking, morality is more about avoiding suffering than about gaining pleasure, because we all sort of hate suffering more. But if it's irrelevant to say that, if it's irrelevant for someone to say, well, we have this bias towards existence and so it should matter, etc. If that's irrelevant, then why is it relevant that we have the bias towards avoiding suffering?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My internet connection went in and out over there, but I got the question being that if just that last part. Sorry, can you repeat that last
Yeah,
part?
yeah. So if it's irrelevant for someone to say, like, we have this bias towards existence and it should matter morally, then why is it not irrelevant to talk about this bias that we have against suffering? because I think it's pretty obvious that it's just a biological bias that we have, right? So why is the one more important than the other in our foundations of ethics?
So if I understand you correctly, you're asking why do we have a bias towards avoiding suffering and
No, no,
not maximizing pleasure? No, it's not that.
no, that's not the
It's
question. The question is sort
no,
of,
it's just because my internet is
yeah, it's
very
okay,
funny.
it's okay. So the question is the following: when we talk about like morality at the foundation, okay, why is it not relevant or not important to take into account
Yeah.
our bias towards existence, but it is
Oh, okay.
relevant and important to take into account our bias against suffering? Both of them seem to be biological biases, so why do we
Hmm.
use the one for our foundation of ethics and not use the
Oh,
other one?
okay, and I understand. Okay. No, actually, I was just mentioning that the bias towards existence as a just an add-on point. I think that but I do think that it is relevant because if we're not here, then we have nothing to complain about, basically. I know that time I spoke to my father and I told him that, I don't think that I would want to have children in the future. And he told me, well, if I decided the same thing, that you wouldn't be here. And then I responded to him, well, I wouldn't be here to complain about not being here. So that's kind of the thing about non-existence and existence. Without existence, pleasure, pain, suffering, having to resolve problems, they disappear because they were never there to begin with. We take that into account because those who are already here, they do have that reality to experience, and what we do to them will impact them. With a non-existent person, there's nothing to impact.
Mm-hmm.
You can speak about a person doesn't exist. We can make a fictional character is not affected by anything. It's a non-existent character. So that's why we take it into account. The second part of that is that of how it plays into it is because suffering is for people who are here. We take it into the fact that, well, they are existing into account because any action that we do will have an impact on them, and that's where morality comes in, because morality kind of guides us into what they would want or what they can experience. Basically, if I know that this can hurt another person or another animal for that matter, my moral framework would kind of at least, I wouldn't say guide, well, maybe guide, yes, but also kind of help me at least acknowledge the fact that I am doing something that may affect this person or animal or sentient being in a good way or a bad way. So that framework of existence does matter.
Okay. So, but can you not acknowledge that you are doing something that causes pain um, without deciding that it's wrong? I know this sounds kind of weird. But
Yeah.
here's the problem I have with morality as a whole, and the reason I want to have these discussions. Um,
Yeah.
we have this sort of, I see this sort of presumption here, um, which is sort of the is ought jump, where we have
Right.
this description, right, of a person who suffers. So this person suffers, this feels really bad, etc. It feels really bad to that person. And you can describe doing an action that causes this suffering, but I don't see how from that you can derive, as a matter of fact, that doing said action is something that you should not do. Because again, you are presuming that you should not do the things which cause sentient beings to suffer. And so my general question, my foundational question is, why do you presume that?
Mm. I was hoping we would get to here because this was basically the point of that video you made on morality,
Yeah.
which I found, I found that to be actually a valid question. But I would also say that these are not things that, okay, let me save that for later. Let me just answer your question. It's not that necessarily that there's a presumption that you should or should not do something just because it affects someone badly. It is something that ultimately comes down to choice. I know that usually when atheists and Christians, for example, just an example, have arguments, they about morality, atheists I've noticed that especially American or Western atheists tend to just directly go for the well, we're social creatures and we're social,
Yeah.
we've evolved to be social, yeah. So if I do this, then it's a very utilitarian way of looking at things, I think. And personally, that's not how I approach the situation. Okay, I will start with my personal, like me alone, with regardless of everybody else, the way that I jump from the is to the ought.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the is to
just
the ought,
one
and then I
second.
will
Just 1 second.
go
Uh,
ahead.
please hold your thought. We will have to break this meeting
Oh,
and
yeah,
create the next one. Okay.
wonderful. I will start with the way that I personally like, in the sense that it's very personal to me, and it may be personal to other people as as individuals view it, and then I will speak as to how the implications and also how it affects others. So for me personally, my number one a reason why I jump from the is to the ought when it comes to morality. In other words, if there's an example of uh, uh, um, I'm angry with someone and I have the option of hitting them. Okay. Maybe they got, I don't have to. It's just a way for me to relieve my anger and everything. So an example like that. The reason I will not do that is because, firstly, I know that it is not necessary for me to hit them. It will cause them harm to hit them. And for me personally, it's because I know this may sound, like it may other people may not view it this way, but for me, it's really because afterwards I will feel terrible about it. It's really just as simple as that. So in other words, I'm appealing to the way I would feel, so emotions basically. It
So,
will it will say,
sorry,
yeah, go
sorry
ahead.
to interject here. So,
No, no problem.
uh, I think what you're talking about here is something like a psychological egoism. I don't know if you've heard about it. So basically, the idea that even when we do moral things, even when we do things for others, essentially we do them for ourselves. We do them because we don't want to feel
Yeah.
bad afterwards. So is that basically what you're?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, yes, it is, and also, I know that initially, when people hear that, they think they try to avoid saying that they're like, no, 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 it's not for myself, it's for the other person. I think that it can be true for both at the same time. Ultimately, it will come down to you because you're the one making the decision. So I think someone can make a case that you care about yourself more than you actually care about the other. But I like to just see it as it's two. The reason why I don't have a problem with admitting that is because I do think that most, if not all, it's debatable, but most of our actions are done for selfish reasons, or at least for, let me not selfish, self-centered reasons. In other words, we're the center of the thing. Forget the selfish part, self-centered.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, and that's what kind of drives me. Now, there are people, and I believe that that comes from a state of empathy, which I believe that any creature with empathy will probably at least understand, at least have the cognitive ability to understand that it is doing harm. So those two things, if you have the cognitive ability to understand, so you're an animal or a sentient being that understands that this can cause harm to another, and you have the factor of empathy, I believe that this will apply to others, but not everybody acts on that. Some people, they are able to either suppress it or they're not. And then if you do not have empathy, then that is what we usually call a disorder,
Mm-hmm.
psychopaths and such people. So that is on personally. Yeah, you
Yeah,
want to say something?
can I? Yeah, yeah. I want to jump in. I want to say two things. First, the thing about we do how we're doing most things because we don't want to feel bad afterwards, or at the end of the day, for some egocentric reason, right? So
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you, but is it not possible to, let's say you get a loan from the bank, right? So you get a loan from
yeah.
the bank, and is it not possible to say, well, I really don't want to give that loan back, and I don't care. Let's say there is no punishment here, right? So we forget about punishment. I really
Mm.
don't want to give the loan back, but in my head I have this obligation. So I have this duty that I have in my head which tells me, well, you should give the loan back. Would you say that counts as a self-centered reason because essentially you're doing it in order to be in your head a good person? Would you say that would be like a self-centered reason?
I would, but the reason that you gave is a little different in my perspective. It's not necessarily because you, okay, impartially, it is because you want to feel, some people, it will be like they want to be able to feel like they're a good person. But I think that for others, in my case at least, it's because it will haunt me. It's because I'm trying to avoid the harm of, having that at the back of the feelings of guilt, basically. Yeah, that's
Okay,
as simple as
okay.
that. I know that some people, if I can add, I know that some people, the egocentric part of it that you're mentioning is a little more superficial. I do know that for some people, it's not necessarily that they're doing it interior wise. It's because of certain benefits that they will
Yeah,
receive from
yeah.
other people, and they do not
Some people
particularly
don't have.
care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people have a strong conscience. Some people don't have a strong conscience, etc.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Mm.
But and the second thing I wanted to ask about, you said that when someone doesn't have empathy, we call it like a disorder. We say it's a psychopath, or someone with antisocial personality disorder or something like that. Interestingly enough, I happen to think
Uh-huh.
that most personality disorders of this sort are kind of, they shouldn't be considered medical disorders, because really, why would we think that the person who lacks empathy is sick? Like, what exactly do we
Right.
mean when we say that this person is like sick, ill? We use the word mental illness for that, but
Mm.
really, if there isn't something that is killing him, like literally,
Mm-hmm.
you're not. It's not like you're born without empathy, and so your system
Mm.
breaks down and you die, or something like that. It's
Mm.
not like you're born without empathy and you suddenly feel a lot of pain. You're just
Mm.
born without empathy. So why
Mm.
exactly do we medicalize that? Why would you call that a disordered person?
Mm. So there is a reason that is more institutional, which is that there's a criteria, sorry, for what constitutes a disorder in at least according to the APA, the American
Yeah,
Psychological
DSM.
Association, and also other organizations. The DSM, thank you very much. And one of those things is not necessarily that it's killing you; it is that it deviates from the norm, or at least that's what I've heard from someone. It's one of the categories. It's not the main one, or it's not the only one. Another thing is also, yes, like you said, that it can be debilitating, like let's say schizophrenia or I don't know what the official term for it is, but
Psychosis.
when you have a psychosis, yeah, and debilitating, and there are other criteria for it. Empathy, therefore, firstly, it does deviate from the norm. I mean, usually, at least for human beings. And I would like to give you an example of this when I'm done explaining this. But for human beings, and for what we have observed in nature, in some cases, it's not entire. I don't know if it's conclusive, but for example, with dogs and other animals that are very social, it has been observed that uh, empathy tends to be the norm. It tends to be, we I can understand empathy by certain actions that people take. So you present a scenario to a human being. If they respond in a way that, in ways that show no empathy or their actions do not, we can kind of see that this person doesn't, have it, and that is not according to norm. Now, if the majority of human beings were in that way, then of course it would not be a disorder. But in this case, the disorder is for that way. And the reason why it's important to diagnose it is because not always, but sometimes it can lead to obviously that person committing other harms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to press this even more though, because you said something
Yeah.
really interesting. If most people were to lack empathy, you
Mm.
wouldn't. I'm sorry, you wouldn't consider it a disorder, or we wouldn't, like as a society, consider it a disorder. Because I'm not sure if you're presenting the view of the common view of society, if you're presenting your own
Oh,
view here.
I would say it's the view of society and my own view as well, because even though it may cause a harm, if it's the norm, at least it's not something that is outside of something that's usual. It may cause harm. Like there are things that are quite normal among people and that are very common among people, which I would say are not good. Like many people being willing to accept that we torture animals, for example. And I'm not saying this because I'm better than anybody. I myself, I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a vegan yet, but there are things that we have, and even in the past, many people may have considered certain things that were uh, in the norm, it was bad. I mean, in the norm, sorry, it was common. It was a common norm. but it wasn't something that it was something that caused harm. You understand? So it wouldn't. I don't think that we as a society would diagnose that as a disorder simply because it is normal. But the harm aspect can still be there just because it's not. So that's why I said that even if we were all like that, if most of us didn't have empathy, it would be normal, but I don't think we would call it a disorder. We would still call it something bad, but not a disorder.
Okay, you would admit that something can be considered disordered with or without having harm in it, right?
I think so. In a certain way, yes.
Okay, so why would it matter that a person without empathy is disordered when you talk about morality?
In reality, most it's not necessarily that it matters to the general public. There are people who we would consider psychopaths who have never murdered anybody or who have never done anything. The reason why we do is because there's just a heightened risk, and I know that it's. I personally like to think that there's a risk with everybody. I don't have that much faith in humanity. Basically, I think that some people who do have empathy can do worse things than psychopaths. But with psychopaths, the fact that they do not empathize with others or other sentient beings, it is convincing them to follow to convincing them of the same morals or the same ideas that would cause harm to others would be the more difficult
Yeah,
for them
but
empathize.
I don't think that's not exactly where my question was going. It's not
Oh,
really
okay.
about. I'm not asking whether they would cause harm. We were talking about morality as such, right? And you said
Yeah.
that the foundation of morality is based on empathy, essentially, if I'm not mistaken. That if
It's a
you
big part of it, yes.
yeah. So if the foundation of morality is empathy, and being disordered doesn't necessarily uh, make you immoral, then why
Hmm.
would the moral opinion of a disordered person, a psychopath, be wrong in the moral context?
No, well, okay. In our context, it would be morally wrong according to my context because of the effect that it has on the other person. But because they do not have that basis of being able and to empathize with somebody, they probably do not see it that way, which is why they have a heightened risk of causing harm to
Hmm.
another person because to them, right, whether it harms them or not, you know. So that's what I mean by that. Yeah, I think it's quite
Okay.
consistent if you look at it from the effect that it has on the person, not just the opinion that we have. Mm.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So again, I don't really see. Okay, so for you, you said personally, you make the jump from the is to the ought,
Mhm.
for because you personally don't want to deal with the guilt. You have a strong conscience, I would imagine, and you want to follow it. But doesn't that kick the question like one
Mhm.
step back and say, okay, why should you follow your conscience? If the answer is because because you don't want to feel bad and you want to avoid feeling bad, um, then I guess in a discussion, then I guess morality to you isn't really an intellectual discussion. It's a discussion about emotion, right?
I'm glad that we got to there because, excuse me, I'm so sorry. It's very, I'm a bit sick.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that it can be an intellectual discussion, but I think that very often we tend to separate the intellectual part of it, uh, or I would say logical parts of it with the practical aspects of the fact that we are human beings. And human beings are not 100, even though we are intellectual, we also act out of our emotions and what we feel. Everything that we do, even scientific inquiries and also even scientific interpretations, you would be very surprised. I don't know. Just a quick question, just so I don't understand. Which year are you in? Are you postgraduate or
No,
um,
I'm undergraduate.
uh, undergraduate? Undergrad. When you get to if you ever go into to do a postgraduate and especially in science, you will start to understand. You'll have to probably pass through research methodology and also biometrics. In that, you will see for yourself that even in science, things are not necessarily objective. They are things that we try to be as objective as possible, but a lot of human the human side of us that it
Biases.
has a lot to do with biases are involved in the process, which is why you cannot that's why scientists usually that's one of the reasons scientists never really say that we are 100% right about something. But going back to the morality thing, I was just putting that there. I think I would say that it is more of a. Did you use the word emotional or
Emotion.
intellectual
Yeah.
and emotional? I would say that my reasons are more emotional than intellectual because intellectually, I think that let me put it this way: if we were 100% to remove the emotional part, I would say that then we are left with utilitarianism, where what benefits me doesn't matter how it harms you, or what benefits you doesn't matter. Yeah.
In
Hmm.
fact, I would say that if you remove emotion completely, you are not left with utilitarianism because utilitarianism is based on the principle that positive emotion is good. So, in fact,
Oh,
if you don't take into account emotions, so if we suppose that we will talk about morality in a purely intellectual manner and we will only talk about
oh,
facts and not about our emotional inclinations, then the idea that you should do what's for your benefit becomes questionable. Why would you do something for your
well,
benefit?
wouldn't it be? Sorry, just to add there, the question would then be, do it for a certain purpose, regardless of how it affects the person's
Exactly.
well-being.
Exactly, and that's
Mm,
exactly, in fact, that's exactly where we had a disagreement in antinatalism, because
mhm,
when I said that to me morality isn't something about like necessarily the pleasure or the suffering of sentient beings, but about end goals, like
mm,
doing something with purpose. This is what I am alluding to. It's like if you really think about it in terms of facts and you don't take into account any emotional inclination, you could have a moral system. It's just that the moral system doesn't seem to have any content in it, which is the problem that I'm grappling with right now. Because imagine you take the emotion out of it, you shouldn't,
mm,
you wouldn't have any reason to prefer benefit from harm, let's say, which is the problem
mm,
I proposed the last time we talked, which was like, why would we think about morality in terms of benefits and harms if it's a truly logical discussion and something not to do with emotional biases? So
mm.
I guess that's the problem I'm running into, which is I want to make like I want to talk about morality in a
Mhm,
way that is truth apt, right? So I want to talk
mhm.
about morality by
Okay.
talking about truth, what's actually the case. But it seems that there isn't such a thing as this is morally good and that being
Mm,
the same as that actually being the case. It seems that it's
mm.
always connected to some kind of preference to feeling.
Well, it 100% it is. May I ask, why do you think that? Okay, no, no, let me start from a simpler point. Uh, do you think that there should be? Do you think that do you want there to be a case where morality can be defined in like a very objective truth, regardless of emotions, regardless of subjective preferences way? Do you want there to be one?
Yeah, if you are asking like Elias the person, I would say
Mm.
absolutely. In
Go.
fact, as a child, I had an obsession, like a true obsession with uh, like what's fair. Right? I was obsessed with the
Right.
idea of everything has to happen in accordance to this like model of justice that was in my head. But I
Right.
never quite questioned it, and now that I'm questioning it, it's really weird. So yeah, I
Mm.
definitely want that to be the case, but it seems that I'm heading into a wall.
Mm. Well, I think that where the problem is, and it's a very age-old dilemma here because there are those who believe. I think you do a bit of philosophy, so you'll probably understand this. And my philosophy is a bit. uh, down, and I'll explain why. It's because, I'm more into practical things, and sometimes the philosophical stuff I feel like it's for people who have a lot of time on their hands. So, but I think that you're familiar with the dichotomy between the consequentialist, if you want to call it that, and
Deontologists.
the deontologist. The ones who believe that there is intrinsic thing, regardless of what you say about it. This is a good act, regardless of the effects of it,
Yes.
deontology, and of course, consequential. So, I would say that that means that you would want there to be a more deontologist view of morality to exist somewhere.
I would want there to be like here's how I would put it. Uh,
Okay.
if morality was about truth, then morality would be deontological, in my opinion.
Right.
Whereas if morality is about emotion and preference, then it would be utilitarian. Or
Mm.
let me put a caveat here.
Well,
Then we,
yeah.
we would want it. Then we would want it to be utilitarian. Either way,
Yeah.
if
So,
if morality isn't to be a thing about truth, like if morality isn't about like something that actually is there objectively, then neither utilitarianism nor deontological theories work.
mm. Okay. So this is actually, I think, a very interesting part of the conversation there, because I've basically had this sort of conversation with my brother when I was a Christian, and he was a step ahead of me because he was pretty much saying the same thing, that I used to tell him, no, 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 this is morally wrong. We have to stick to our morals and stuff. And he'd be like, morals according to who, blah, blah, blah. And I always used to think that he's just a subjectivist. But no, in reality, it does come down to that. And it does get very political, actually, I would say, especially in the United States, because what usually, and I'm not trying to bring politics into, I'm just trying to explain that this is a very widespread question that people have. Usually, people want their political or whatever views or any views to be true no matter what. Like, no matter what, it's not my opinion, it is true regardless of whatever. And people bring that into politics. They kind of go with the, no, 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 let's just say abortion, no, 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 abortion is wrong because of whatever. And that's how, usually why you'll find that many people, even though they are atheists, will still call themselves or try to gravitate towards Christianity, because Christianity provides an objective view of it,
Yeah,
even though when you
exactly.
actually go into it, it's yeah, exactly. So people want their moral views to be objectively truthful. And the problem is that personally, I do not believe that is the case. And I will give you an example before I give you the example that you may have already heard. Think about it this way. Firstly, we are on planet Earth. We're human beings and we live here with a lot of species and so on. But imagine if just our biological makeup was a little bit different. Imagine if, for example, we were like plants. We had chlorophyll in us and we could photosynthesize. Imagine the implications that would have on the morality of eating animals. We wouldn't have to. And it's not even because of a choice. It's because we can't. We literally get our food from the sun. Okay? So imagine now if there is that type of life form that is intelligent. In other words, it has cognitive ability. It's like us, but then it photosynthesizes. Morality would be completely changed in that way, because in that regard anyway. Maybe other things might be the same,
Hmm.
but those things. I'm just using that example to show you that morality, I do not think can ever be what grand scheme objective, because it does have to do with the reality that we are facing.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
guess
go ahead.
I guess the issue there, I don't think I really follow the implication there, because yeah, if we had a different ontology, um,
Yeah,
again, people like to make a very big distinction between the mind and the body, but in fact, if we had a way different body, we would be in ontologically different subjects, right?
yes,
We would see and perceive things completely differently. So now,
yes.
if we were ontologically different, of course, there would be more moral questions, but
Okay.
on the moral questions that are common between that
Mm,
ontological entity and our ontological entity
mm,
right now,
mm,
if morality were objective, the answer
mm.
in both cases would be the same,
Well,
right?
yeah, would be the
So I
same.
don't
Yeah, I
think
get
it's
what you
really
mean. Mm,
important. I don't think it's really a problem for from
mm,
the objectivist. I don't think that that's particularly a problem.
You actually do make a good point there. I think that if the objective aspect of it would not necessarily go away just because the situation is a bit different. But that was just an example just to show you that the way that we would handle morality would be different. But I get what you mean. Now, as for objectivity itself, if I have to be very honest and you want to know my honest view on it, I actually do not particularly care about there being an objective truth to morality. The reason for that is because of how the reason why I want there to, the reason why we have morality, in my view, in the first place. The reason why I explained like before is because of the effects that it has on people. It has to do with the reality that we are facing here and now. If there was another planet where things are different, like for example, the photosynthesizing people planets and everything, we would obviously shift to that, you know. But I do not think of it as a grander thing, maybe because I just, you know, I think that it's a bit of a waste of time to try to think of it. And also because even if we did have one, it would not change how we would actually act upon it.
That's a very interesting point. If there was an objective morality, like an objectively grand like way that is the correct way to act, would we really do it if it made us feel bad? That's a really great question, right? If it really made us suffer, would we really act in that way? And I think there would be two kinds of people, as we said. Some people would act in that way, and some people wouldn't. And the problem would be reinforced again. It would be like, okay, sure, there is this objective list of commands or list of imperatives that we have, but the people that are sort of utilitarian in tendency, they would be like, well, okay, whatever, it doesn't make me feel good, why should I follow that? Unless there is some kind of suffering like hell, which is why people now gravitate to religion very often.
Religion.
Yeah, that
really, is 100% true.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Sorry,
because religious people will say, and the weird thing is, I'm religious as well, but I'm not a Christian. I'm not like I don't really think that any of the religions are correct in their dogmas at all. But anyway, religious people will often say like that they have an objective morality, right? So it's objective. But if you ask them, why do you follow God's commands, for example, most of them, like, unless they are trained theologians, most of them would just say to avoid hell or to be closer to paradise. Right. So again, they're utilitarians, just one step behind. So
yes, exactly. Because ultimately, if you really think about it, like we said, most of the stuff is self-centered or egocentric, like you said.
Egocentric,
Yes, exactly. And that applies mostly across the board. People will do things for themselves. So I think that is the natural way that it will lead people to that on a daily basis. At first, you may think that, I mean, there will be some, if they are super indoctrinated, I would say, into the thing, they would even give up their own well-being for a certain cause. And that has happened, and we do see that happen. But it is usually because, you know, it's actually still utilitarian, because usually you would need to be convinced for that. For example, being able to give up your if a priest tells you we need to sacrifice you because it will please the gods, they will do it because it pleases the gods, not because of whatever. And I think that's still utilitarian in a way.
Yes, but I feel I feel there has to be some kind of exception there, because I don't want to put everyone in the same basket here. I don't remember the name of the philosopher right now, but there was a philosopher who thought that essentially the only way Immanuel Kant. Yeah, Immanuel Kant. So so Immanuel Kant thought that basically the only way to make an action truly moral is to do it out of a sense of duty. And I think that's very interesting for the discussion we're having right now, because if you do something out of a sense of duty, are you really doing it in a utilitarian way? Are you really doing it egocentrically? like, yes, of course, you can ask the question of, is this person doing it just so they can know that they are a good person? But
Mhm.
even still, I think some people, at least, would do the correct thing if they knew it was just the correct way for things to be, just for the sake of doing it.
Right. But then that would have, and that's the thing. I think that in that such a case, or even if, and even if with if objective truth was there, we would need to then give up our sense of reason, basically, at least a portion of it. Because think about it. If we have, if we have an objective thing, truth, this is right, this is wrong, regardless, it's 100% objective and everything. Our sense of this, questioning, or our sense of applying that to, is it really the case for us, would kind of have to go out the window, because at the end of the day, that means that we are doing it regardless of the effects. We are doing it regardless of a purpose, really, at that point, because we don't even know. They may give us a purpose. They may tell us that
Yeah, no, it's
it's
purposeless. It's
it's right.
purposeless.
Yeah, it is purposeless, because I mean, if if bringing a bunch of grapes to the altar every day without reason, it's just we've just been told it's objectively good, is good in itself. There is no purpose. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad we agree with that, because there is no purpose. So we would have to give up that sense of questioning, why are we doing this in the first place? So I think that people should probably wonder, why would they want an objective morality to exist in the first place? Morality, okay. So if I can just finish what I was actually saying with that, with why I think that thinking about objective morality is useless in my view, is because I use morality, or I would want people to use, and I see a lot of people use morality for more practical reasons. I see them use it for to decide on situations. For example, two people are fighting. One person did this, and one it led to that, and everything. We kind of see, if it's not for any other political reasons and everything, in the situation, if it's your children, for example, I think that people would use their sense personally of morality to kind of decide between as a matter of justice. It may not be right to somebody else, right? So, I mean, a person may think that, oh well, he stole his cake, he ate it, it was in the fridge. So the one who the victim hits the other one. One person will come and say, well, it didn't justify him taking physical action and hitting him. The other person will say, no, he's justified. Why did he eat the cake in the first place? So it may not be, people may not agree on it, but at least it will lead, it has a certain purpose, and it may lead to us making decisions on a grounds of at least how it can benefit or avoid harm, or increase pleasure. Now, whether it does in reality is, of course, questionable. I mean,
Yeah.
buying someone, giving someone a whole lot of candy, to one person may seem like, oh, you're doing a good thing. You're doing what they asked for. But is it really good for their health? So,
Yeah, but okay, so what I would ask you then is,
mm,
if we agree that morality is, as you said, a practical tool that we use, and it should be thought of in that way, um, how exactly would you justify? How exactly would we justify the kinds of things that seem to be very radical and yet very, like, intuitively we have to do it?
oppose.
So for here's what I mean. For
Okay.
example, putting a person in jail, right? If you
Hmm.
think about it just as an action, it's a pretty radical action, right? So you take a person by
Hmm.
will, without their will, and you're putting them in a cell, and you say you'll stay there for as long as we say, right? That's basically
Hmm.
what we do. That's a very big transgression of their, of their freedom and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I would like to ask if that person is personally opposed to this, like, moral framework that we put around the specific law that they broke, then by what kind of justification are we to put him in jail?
Hmm. It would be the justification of who has the most power. It really comes
Yeah.
down to that. It would be, yeah, it really does come down to that. And that's why I always advocate that there needs to be a separation. I mean, not there needs to be, sorry, please scratch that. People need to understand that legality and morality are not necessarily intertwined or even based off each other. We don't necessarily create laws because it's right or wrong. People, governments do not take actions necessarily because they believe it's right or wrong. They do it usually. Legality has to do with order. So, for example, we don't want people. I don't know, stealing from shops because it kind of defeat what order is there if people are allowed to steal from another person because then the other person will just go and steal from that person back and then it will just be a back and forth. Eventually it will come down to who has the most power and then, so to avoid that because everything in this world has to do with what you can do and what you cannot do. The people who can do something to another person and the person who will be a victim, unfortunately, to that. To be moral, however, is to kind of find a system that works in the best way, because obviously no systems in this world. Well, and I will get to the prison example just now, but like we try to find a system that works in the best way that we do not have to resort to people having to live by the strongest, So if I have something and we have laws that say that this is mine, a person who is physically stronger than me can come and take it. But there will have to be some measures where the collective can prevent him from doing that. If there was a being like Superman or whatever that was more powerful than any government or any system that we have in place that can physically control people, because that's what it all comes down to, what you can and what you cannot do. If there was such a being, that person would literally be outside the law and that has nothing to do with morality, but he would not necessarily be in other words, he would be able to do it and he would not have to face any consequences for it. So in the example of, but in the system that we use today, especially in the systems of any sort of governance, even if it's a local tribe somewhere, there will be some sort of governance where transgressors will be punished and everything, no matter how people like to use, no matter how, even if it's not as sophisticated as or complex, every civilization has some sort of law and some sort of governance and order in their communities. So even in the simplest forms of those governments, there will be it will come down to if we can actually enforce those laws that we create. So if you do this, can we actually stop you from doing it physically? If we cannot, then that's where legality kind of starts to fail. But morality doesn't, in the sense of it will still harm the other person. So that's why I started by saying that morality and legality are not necessarily intertwined.
I mean,
in the case of a person that we put in jail. No, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it will still harm other people, but
yes.
as we said, morality. We agreed that morality either cannot be objective or, like in my opinion, it can be objective, but it would be purposeless in a way. But anyway. Let's say that morality cannot be objective, right? So even if it still harms other people, then the moral aspect of it still doesn't apply because there is no moral aspect to it, or the moral aspect to it is like personal, as you said. And since it is personal,
yes.
then the aggressor has just as much say in it as you do. So
yes. Yes. No. I totally agree. That's actually why I mentioned the whole thing that it does come down to power. If the majority of people do say that stealing is okay or beating your wife is okay or you are, let me give an example that actually happened. Some people, at least I believe, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the warrior class, the samurai class in Japan at a certain era could legally murder a person if they were disrespected by a commoner, for example. So, that was a law that was in place and stuff. So we can have if a situation where the majority do say something that harms other people and does not do them any good. But that's why I said, unfortunately, we do live in a reality, in a world, in an existence where if you cannot apply that morality, whatever morality you have, then oh, it looks like we have 1 minute.
Yeah, we have 1 minute.
Whatever morality. Yeah, let me just finish the sentence then. Whatever morality you have will ultimately need to be enforced. I wanted to actually say something on that, but let's just restart and then.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so there was something very important that you said. You said that you do think that there's. I objective morality. The reason for that is because, it seems to
I'm sorry.
have
I'm sorry.
the
Can you
implication.
I lost for some reason I couldn't hear your audio well. So can you say again?
Oh, no problem. Can you hear me now, though?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, hopefully. Just let me know if yeah. So, I'll get back to what I was finishing off, but I wanted to say something. I do not particularly use the term objective morality. I would rather say universal morality, but let me define it this way. It's what a lot of people, I mean, I think that some people call it moral relativism or something. I don't know what the terms are, but it's basically where I think what matters is what if it causes someone harm, basically. I do not think that I do not believe in objective morality because if the truth is that this is right just on itself, then obviously whether it causes harm or not, or whatever the effects are on the person, do not matter. In the objective or the universal morality that I believe in, or that I follow, and that I think a lot of other people do on in a practical level, is that um, regardless of how it affects people. I mean, sorry, that if it affects people, obviously, then it is morally uh, wrong. If a lot of people believe in that, then people tend to think that that is objective, that, oh, that is the objective way to do things. Don't beat your wife. That's objectively wrong. So people use that colloquially, but I just want to emphasize that even though I do think that a lot of people can agree on that because of the framework that we use, which is that it causes harm to the other person unnecessarily, then we would call it objective, but in reality, it's just because we're using that framework. It's not a sense of it's wrong because some um, a real truth or inherent metaphysical truth says that it is. You understand? So, in a case, there may be a weird situation where beating someone is, in that case, the right thing to do. I'm not saying that, I can't think of a situation like that, but it wouldn't be, there is no objective thing that tells us that no, that beating is wrong regardless of any situation. So that's kind of how I view it.
Okay. So it seems you're a sort of like um, I don't know how I would call it, but maybe universalist would be a good word. So
Let's go with that. Why not?
yeah, sure. So my question would be, you understand that you cannot use that model of morality to make truth claims, though, right? So you can use that model of morality to say this is what I would like to happen, this is what I would like to see
Hmm.
happen, or this is what I prefer to see happen, and you can
Hmm.
say this is what we should do because
Hmm.
I believe that we should.
Of the
Uh,
framework, yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But if we're having, for example, with antinatalism, when we were talking, I don't see how you can use that framework to say that and I don't think that that's what you're saying either. So
Hmm.
I don't think you can use the framework to say that like creating a person is wrong because you don't think that there is anything as a like is wrong truly actually. So and I don't think that that's what you were trying to do anyway. But many people that's what how many people or most people even
Yes.
think about moral discussions. So when we're talking about whether something is wrong or right, it seems that you are talking about something a little bit different uh,
Hmm.
compared to what most people understand by right or wrong. Is that accurate?
It is 100% accurate, yes. And I think I even said that just before you said that as well, that a lot of people will use terms like, oh, it's objectively wrong, like that is objectively the right thing to do, or that is objectively. Um, I can understand what they're trying to say, that everybody would say that that is right or that is wrong. Okay, that's basically what they mean. But when for example, if I say in antinatalism, let's take that example, that bring a child into the world. Okay, maybe no, I shouldn't use antinatalism as an example because I know that I have a certain way of explaining my antinatalism. So if you don't mind, I'll use a different example.
Sure.
Um, if I say that. stealing something from someone that was not initially yours. So, for example, you're not stealing something that was yours back or anything. Like this belongs to somebody made a chair. They built a chair. It's theirs. They even wrote their name on it, whatever. And you go and you just take it. Okay. A lot of people, I would say, would think that that is wrong, or beating a disabled person. Okay, let's go with something even more like intense. A person that cannot defend themselves, they're in a hospital bed, and you go in there, and just for the sake of your own pleasure, just because you're a weird sticker or whatever, you go in there with a baseball bat and start beating on them, right? Yeah. So that is a pretty intense example. A lot of people would say, with their words, that that is objectively wrong. The way what I am saying is that I'm not making a claim that that is metaphysically wrong, or it's wrong in of itself, or what. Well, it is wrong in that way, but it is wrong because of the framework that I'm working under, which is that it is causing harm to a person unnecessarily. When I now apply that to other situations in the world that are even less that other people may disagree with, a lot of people may disagree with. Let's say uh, let's say antinatalism, for example. That if I say that bringing a child into the world it's wrong because it causes harm to that child, and somebody else disagrees. What I'm actually saying is that it is wrong for this, and that reason. So I hope you understand that. So everything that I say, whenever I say that something is wrong, it is for certain reasons. But if you say that something is objectively right or wrong, then I think that that has no reason, because it's just wrong out of being wrong. There's really no purpose. So you understand?
Yes, yes. So this is sort of the problem with the principle of sufficient reason, which says that we should have a reason to believe everything that we believe. But obviously, if you had a reason to believe everything that you believed, then you would have an infinite amount of reasons that go back infinitely without a beginning thing. So when
I don't think so. Would that be a problem though? Like to have many reasons?
no, I think it's a problem. It's not like many reasons, it's an infinite chain of reasons. So an example would be, why do I believe that this pen is, I don't know, why do I believe that this pen is plastic? Well, I believe this pen is plastic because I have felt plastic before and it feels like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, and then you say, why do you believe that?
Why do you believe that? And then you keep going.
Exactly, and then you keep going infinitely. So this is the problem. When people talk about objective morality, they want to give sort of a solution to that problem, I think. Because you say, I believe hitting a disabled person is wrong. Why? Because it causes pain. And why is causing pain wrong? Well,
pain wrong.
Yeah, to you, the answer is just, this is what many people believe, right? Like, this is what many people
Or
feel.
it may limit itself somewhere. Yeah. I would say that it limits itself somewhere. At some point, you as an individual may stop at, for example, for me, I would just stop at the fact that it causes the person pain. It's even if beyond that, it is like what you discussed at the beginning, that it would affect me psychologically and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think
that is
that
the
would
reason,
be
right?
I think that would be actually the end reason for you, right? That would be the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because after that point, I don't care what other reasons there are. That's my endpoint. But I would say that for most people, they do want an objective thing, because when you're arguing for something, or when you're trying to change something, especially in society or for yourself, people would kind of expect you to give reasons. And that's why it's important. However, like I said, unfortunately, and this is a reality that even though we don't usually say it out loud, it is kind of the fact. It does come down to eventually to who can actually do this or that. And that's why we do have protests. That's why when people see that, for example, their governments, which is much more powerful than them individually, are not, for example, they passed a law that is harming or going to cause a lot of harm to people, they protest. They protest physically. They go into the streets and they protest because they want their that policy to be changed in the society that they live. Now, the reasons that they have, and the reason why they do that is because clearly there is an impasse. Some people, the government has an idea of morality or legality or whatever you want to say. Even if we don't have to go to the level of government, let's say two people disagree on something based on morals. I think that this is morally right. I think that this is morally wrong. Or I think that this is morally not a problem. I think that this morally is a problem. In the end, people will have to, well, they'll argue at first by giving reasons for why this is wrong and everything. But when they come to a point where they're at an impasse, where you know, I don't care what you say, whatever reasons you give, you can have your reasons, but I have mine. Then at the end, even though we don't say it very often, it does come down to who has the power to actually change that or make that a reality. And uh, that's kind of what it comes down to, unfortunately, because that's the world and the reality that we live in.
Yeah, but I think that's more of a sort of descriptive claim than a normative claim. It's not about, like, what you described here is how the world in fact works, not
Yeah.
how it should work, or not how, like, you know, you're basically saying this is what happens
Mm.
in the world, and
Yes.
that's why I care about it. So
Hmm.
it's a more pragmatic sort of, it's a pragmatic use of, I
Mm.
don't know, like, this
Yeah. Yeah.
discussion, let's say, instead of having a, so in a sense you're turning your back to the purely truth-seeking aspect of thinking, right? So
Yes, and I've done that a long time ago, to be honest. The reason why I led into that is because I have realized, and this is just from my personal experience, but also just because of how, like we said, how the world, the reality that we live in actually works. I can have a whole lot of philosophical explanations as to why I believe this, or that to be right or wrong. Um, but ultimately, I've realized that in my life, that is not what actually gets things done. That is not actually what gets the changes that I would want to see in the world to be realized. What gets the changes in the world to be realized is by working in the reality that we are unfortunately entrapped in. And that is by what I've described. But if you want to have a philosophical discussion about the actual truth part of it, that no, we need to have a sort of explanation of why this is actual truthful, then we would probably fall into that infinite reason
yeah,
thing
yeah,
that you
infinite
said, because
regress.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
regress.
So
Uh, yeah.
yeah, I
And
guess.
and just if I can add, it's just because also, if I can just say, in my personal life, that's also what I've experienced. Probably that's what's led to that. You can give a whole lot of people reasons for this and everything, but ultimately it will be subjective, and that's what we do see in the world. It will be, if somebody wants to really kill me, they really want to kill me regardless of whatever morals they have. They may even think it's a good thing. Maybe they think it's a holy thing to kill me. Me arguing that or giving them reasons practically has no, it's not going, it doesn't work for everybody, which is why I depend rather on what practically works to help people from that. So I would practically want to physically protect a person and have laws in place to protect people rather than having to argue, because I do not particularly believe that there is an objective way of objective truth. And even if there is, how would we even get to that? Because who would determine that? Some people would say God, because, or the creator of the universe, or whoever is the most highest being would do that. But then that would still be subjective, I would say. It would still be his view of morality. Maybe not of truth. Maybe we're in a simulation and he knows whatever reality is in reality. Maybe that's one thing, but that has nothing to do with morality. Morality has to do with what we're describing in my framework as right or wrong.
Okay, look, in my view, I think um, the way I like to think about it is, I think there is actually an objective good. Like, I think there is an objectively correct order of things, let's say. Um, but I do think that when we talk about morality, usually we are referring to, um, like, how can I put this? Even if there is an objectively correct moral order in the world or in nature, let's say, um,
Mm.
the question of, like, should we follow it, or should we do what we like, or should we do whatever, etc. This, like, the fact that it exists doesn't change anything. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
The fact that it exists doesn't really change anything in how we, in
Yes.
fact, talk about morality, or in fact um, act based on morality. And this is where sort of the problem arises, because there's people like you who are more pragmatic about it, like more oriented towards, okay, how can I use this to do the thing that I want to do in my life practically?
Mm.
Um, and then there is people who like are very abstract. How can I say it? Like,
Yeah, abstract. Yeah,
yeah,
like you said,
I
like
think
philosophical.
exactly, and I feel that I fall into that category more, where to me, for some reason, it really matters whether something is true and in the world, etc., even if it doesn't affect me at all. And I think that's
Mm.
just like a sort of difference in character, perhaps, uh,
I
or
would say a difference in character.
yep,
Yeah, go ahead.
or if not, yeah, if not a difference in character, maybe a difference in sort of um, tendency.
I would say, yeah, I would say, okay, well, let's start with there. So this difference does, yeah, you're absolutely right, does exist. And actually, when you invited me for this discussion, I was hoping that we would get to this, the difference between people, those who have these abstract things, which I used to be maybe at some point. I used to want that as well and everything. But I think that that tends to be because even in politics, even if with everyone, it's because people kind of want to put more weight onto what their opinions are without calling it an opinion. I think that especially when it comes to politics or things that need to be changed, people don't want to just say that this is what I think or this is what, especially in America, especially the right, the political right. They want to present themselves, and I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not criticizing. I'm just putting it as to what they say. For example, they would want to put it in the sense of they want to avoid saying that these are my feelings. They want to try to make things as objective as possible because they believe that that would bring more credence, which is why you have people like Ben Shapiro who would say something like, no, facts don't care about your feelings, and then 90% of the time he's giving opinions that have to do with how he feels about stuff. So and obviously everybody does this. They want to put some kind of credence onto their opinions that without making it seem like it's an opinion. But in reality, for me, yeah, go ahead.
Um,
Yeah, I was just going to say, in reality, for
yep.
me, it's just that I think that even though that is what people would want to do, I don't. Even first of all, they would need to demonstrate how exactly what they are saying is objective. I know that their desire may be there, and there may be other reasons why somebody would want to have a objective reality or an objective truth about things. But firstly, how would we even know that it's objective? And secondly, why would that matter if, it won't really affect things in this world? I think that we do come to it because of our different backgrounds, our upbringings, and also other beliefs that we may have. For example, I'm not religious at all. For me, I think religiosity plays a big role in this because people who are religious, even if they don't have one particular religion, people who are religious will tend to want to see things more abstractly in the sense of a grander scheme of things that, there is some truth or objective reason or for this or that. So I would say that that is probably the biggest reason why there's that division between people.
Okay. So in the a few things here. In the question of why it would matter, like why this objective truth that the person has would
Yeah.
matter, I think that question doesn't apply to people who just truly who really care about being in sync with the truth for no reason other than that, like
Yes.
for in it of itself. And that's why I think that question, for example, if you asked me that question, I would say there is no further reason, there is no further purpose to this. It's like I want to be in sync with reality, and that's that. There is no further thing to say here. But yeah, for more pragmatically or more practically oriented people, they would have to provide some sort of answer to that. And I do think the
Yeah.
majority of people are practically oriented, and that's obviously really important. Otherwise, we would die very easily. Yeah, but
Yeah.
also another thing, I don't think this applies to like. I don't think this is a political thing because if you go, for example, I think this is a thing about people who want to be outside the norm in general. So, for instance,
I agree. Yeah.
the communists, for instance, uh, of the 20th century, they used to, like, their whole thing was about pure objectivity and like science, and like we will be the most like objectively and scientifically minded people, and there will be no superstition here, etc. And paradoxically, they made more propaganda than like the whole history of humanity, right? So
Right.
again, I think it's more about people who want, as you said, they want to build credence into their opinions because their opinions battle the status quo. So,
Or maybe not the status quo. I wouldn't say the status quo. I would actually say they just battle other opinions or other viewpoints. Some actually wants to keep the status quo, which is why they are advancing it in the first place. Like, for example, if back then when there was slavery, some people would bring these arguments from a biblical point of view to keep the status quo of slavery. So it's to battle the people who are opposing their views. Yeah.
yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, exactly. So, I think everyone does that to some extent, but I don't think it's necessarily a malevolent thing, because I think the way we talked about it, it seems sort of like in bad faith or something. It's not that, well, people want to put credence into their opinions because they want to dominate others with their opinion or whatever, although many people do, and in fact, I would say most people are driven by this sort of, or not most, because if
Some,
you,
let's just say
yeah,
that.
yeah, let's just say some, because if you actually talk to some villagers in Greece, for instance, you will not see a lot of power-driven people, or like,
Right, right.
yeah, exactly. But
Yeah. But I
uh,
would, sorry, just on that point, I would say that the reason why it does, I may have made it sound malevolent, is because remember that if they are alluding to something that of the people who do this, not necessarily the political right, the people who try to make their viewpoints objective are and simultaneously trying to stifle the opinions of the others by firstly by maybe putting it in the sense of this is what is right overall. Whatever opinions they have are other people have are not to be regarded. While at the same time, that objective thing that they're saying is just an opinion. They're just trying to make it to change the conversation to make it seem like it's not it's comparing apples to oranges. That's one thing. The second thing is that also having usually whenever people bring up the idea of an objective truth, it is to stifle critical thinking. So in the sense that don't think further than this. This is the truth. Bible says that, Bible says that homosexuality is wrong. Homosexuality is wrong. That's where the conversation ends and no more thinking about it. Oh, but what about those who are born that way? No more thinking about it. What about how exactly is it wrong? No more thinking about it. Does God really care about that? No more thinking about it. Or even this scripture and that scripture contradict each other. No more thinking about it, you see? So it stifles critical thinking. So that's why there is a bit of malevolence. Okay, maybe not intention. Let's not talk about intention. Whatever their intentions are, maybe some of them have good intentions. But let's talk about the effects. That's usually what I do. I think that there may be some bad effect to that. So I just want to add that there.
yeah, but I think you're neglecting like the positive side of like this coin that we're talking about, because yes, if you look at it in that example or through that lens, you will see like a sort of person who inevitably does something bad because their opinion, although subjective, they try to make it objective in order to stop all other opinions from attacking it, etc. Yes, this can be both malevolent and it can also be non-malevolent but dangerous, etc. But we can also see it as sort of a very virtuous thing to do or a very heroic thing to do, because there is something to be said for people who actively strive or actively there's something to be said about people who simply want to find the truth, and that doesn't necessarily have to, of course, implicitly they're always a little bit biased. Everyone is biased, right, towards certain things, but at least in their minds, in their consciousness, there is something to be said for people who actually just want to see where the evidence leads and like see what truth they can come to, and have this sort of mindset, because this kind of thinking, it's the only kind of thinking that can lead to things like science. It's the only kind of thing
Right.
that can lead to like this urge that we have to create things and to make like and to find truth. So I think even though there is a negative aspect to it, where moralists will use it unwisely, I think this sort of spirit of we want to find the truth for its own sake is, I mean, to me, it's necessary. Like I don't know what Elias means without this sort of aspect of my selfhood. But even to, in a broader sense, for other people, etc., I think it's at the very least useful. So
No, on that 100%. I actually created two videos in my series about indoctrination, where one had to focus on truth claims in the sense of what we can show to be real and what we can kind of demonstrate to be real. And I separated that from moral truth claims, or moral claims rather, because when you're talking about what you just said, like that feeling, I totally agree. Not feeling, sorry, that drive or that mindset of wanting to have something be objectively true. Actually, I think that is definitely not a political thing. I think that a lot of, well, it can be, but I think a lot of people would want to know what the truth is in their day-to-day lives, even if some people, they would rather not know some things because they might cause them harm, whatever. People would want to know what's objectively the reality of the situation. Is there going to be is there a store? Is it raining outside, for example? Small things to even bigger things like what happens when you put cyanide in whatever,
yeah,
those kind of
even
questions.
if
They
it
want to
isn't
know the
useful,
objective truth of it. But
even if it isn't useful,
even if it's not useful, no, yeah, I totally agree. But that is not the same thing when it comes to morality, because morality has to do with the effect. One thing we can know is that the effects that it has. Okay, in my framework, what we know is that uh, the only thing that interests me in my framework is whether it has harm to the other person or not, right? The things about that are amoral, or sometimes things that people try to make a moral issue, which I don't think that they are, is where the problem comes in. That's why no framework of morality we can actually say is 100% objective. Because there are some things, for example, that I don't even think it has to do with morals. Like who you, in the Bible, I know that this some people may say no, there were reasons for this, but for example, there's a law, the law of Moses that prohibits the Israelites from wearing polyester, basically clothing of mixed fabric, right? For me, yeah, that is an objective law from God, right? But for me, it's like, what does that have to do with morals? You see, so there are even some things that people try to make about morals that are not even about morals. But then it's not objective. You understand? It's not objective, like wanting to know what happens when you put cyanide on an apple, for example. That is something that has to do with reality. Like we can actually demonstrate, we can record it, we can find out things, and that can lead to scientific discovery on, for
well,
example,
I'm afraid.
mm,
Well, I'm afraid you can't really make that distinction, and here is the
mhm,
the reason. We agreed so far that like it's really difficult to make morality. At least we agree that making morality objective seems to make it purposeless, or like it wouldn't actually, like the actual morality that we're talking about isn't really the objective morality that we think about abstractly.
yeah,
Okay, so we agree there, but when you make this distinction between true claims and moral
mhm,
claims, I'm
mhm,
afraid it's really difficult to make that distinction. I would need uh, like when we talk about, for example, the external world existing, right? Or
mhm,
we could even Not the external world existing. Let's say, for example, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's.
Let's take that example of what happens if you put cyanide on an apple. I don't think it has to do with morals, but it does have to do with truth. We want to know
No,
what
it
happened.
doesn't have to do with truth because it.
Okay?
Although, look, in my opinion,
Or reality. I don't know
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
it's semantics or.
Yeah, in my opinion, it does have to do with truth, but I don't see how you can demonstrate that it has to do with truth. For example, whatever kind of reason you provide, we will run into the
Mhm.
exact same problem that we ran into the morality thing. But instead of moral infinite regress, it's
Mhm.
going to be an
Mhm.
epistemic infinite regress. Like, I'm going
Right.
to ask you, how do you know
Yes.
exactly?
Mhm.
How do you know this? How do you know
Yeah,
that? How do you know that?
I totally get you, but then think about it. It was just because, just like with my moral framework, it had a limit, which was, my cognitive state of mind or my psychological state of mind. With the truth one, it can limit itself to what we need. So, for example, I was
Exactly. So it
actually
doesn't have
running
to
an
do with
experiment.
truth, actually.
Yeah.
See, so even then,
Well,
it doesn't
okay.
have to do with truth. It has to do with practically what you want to use. So even
Yes,
unconsciously.
exactly. Yes. Yes, yes. So I see that as useful because we can still make important scientific discoveries from that. We can discover medicine and technology that can work because even though we can ask those infinite regress questions, those are philosophical questions. And at some point, we would want to know what works on a practical level. So if you want, but I do know that what you're maybe alluding to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that realism debate where how do we know this is really real or really true and stuff. But I think in the realm of yeah,
Yeah, what I'm
go ahead.
alluding to is that I don't want to put it into category of whatever other people have said. I want to put it
Yeah,
in my words. It would be something like, uh, if you accept the sort of reasoning that we did with morals before,
yeah,
then you would have to accept that truth, like in the metaphysical, like actual nature of
mm,
like truth itself,
yeah, yeah.
is actually completely elusive and impossible to grasp even in
Mm.
epistemic things.
Yes, I agree with that. We could be living in a simulation. We could be whatever. But I do not see how, once again, just like with morality, I only care about what's practical. If we are living in a simulation where a child is suffering outside right now, outside of my house and everything, and I can help them, I'm going to help them regardless of whether we're living in a simulation or not. So,
Yeah,
the thing is that I don't really, I do agree. We do not know so many things, and I'm actually that's why I kind of like discussions like this because I want there to be a clear distinction on things that we may know, things that we do not know, and such things. But I agree with you.
yeah,
It would be elusive, just like with the
yeah.
morality thing.
What you're talking about sounds a lot like a philosophical position known as contextualism, which is actually the view that I defend personally, which basically says, well, knowledge claims, if you take
Hmm.
like the skeptics uh, bar for truth, which is absolute certainty, right? So you would
Hmm.
only know something if it was 100% certain that that thing is true. With that bar, you can know
Hmm.
nothing. But
Yes, of course.
what the contextualist answer is that, well, let's not use that bar. It's like
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
So basically,
Mm.
what you're saying is, well, if I want to know where the supermarket is, I don't
Hmm.
care if the external world is real. I just,
Mm.
I just,
Yeah.
I just take it for granted. I just say, yeah, whatever. It may
Mm.
not be real, but I want to go to the supermarket.
Mm.
So,
Exactly. Which is why for me I don't take such hard stances on things that like that. For example, there may be a God, there may not be a God. There may be multiple gods, there may not be multiple gods. I work with what is relevant and what is kind of important.
relevant.
Okay, bye, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, relevance and what is also helpful to people. So forget morality for a moment. On the epistemological side, yes, if there is some compound that we can use that can create a medicine that can help people, let's go with that. But then, asking questions further on that. That's why I said at the beginning of this, I think that philosophy sometimes is for people who just have a lot of time on their hands. For those of us who want to, solve problems now, we'll take what works and then we'll ask those other philosophical. Because, for example, solipsism. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, solipsism.
You
Yeah.
could argue, yeah, we could argue till we die about whether I'm just having a dream and you're part of my dream, or you're having a dream, or whatever. We could give all sorts of reasons. To me, I do not care. I care
Yeah.
about going and getting some food and eating.
Yeah, yeah. You should read G.E. Moore. Search G.E. Moore, and right next to it, hand, because he basically in a paper that he wrote, he said, like, if the skeptic asks you, how do you know that your hand exists? Just raise your hand and say, here it is.
Like, for real, seriously, that's really, to me, what matters. So that's basically the thing. There was a question I wanted to ask you, but I think we may need to
Yeah, yeah.
restart.
No, I think we should close the discussion in a few minutes. So
Start closing, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I had a question on something that you said. Hopefully, it wasn't too important, or we covered it somewhere. But I was also going to ask you a little bit about your religious beliefs. When you say that you are religious, but you don't adhere to any sort of religion, how does that work exactly? Wouldn't you say that you're more spiritual than religious? Or...
no. I don't. I hate that word actually, because when people say, "Well, I'm spiritual," they usually mean I'm not sure what I believe in, but there's something there, etc. That's
Oh,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, that's not the kind of thing that I'm talking about. The way I would say that I fundamentally cannot not think that the world has an order, and
Okay.
also I think that there being this order, I cannot imagine, or no, I would put it in a different way. I would say that the world seems to me to be created. That's how I would put it. Instead of
Intelligently designed.
yeah, something like that. I don't like the word intelligence again, because it anthropocentrizes it. It's like
Yeah.
the person in the sky who's thinking about, let's make a world or
Yeah.
something. That's not what I'm alluding to. I would say probably a deist. I would say I'm probably a deist.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically, if I would want to just make sure that my position on this is very well clarified, basically for me, what matters is the well-being of people, but mostly with an emphasis on them not suffering as much as possible. We cannot please everyone in the way that they would want to be pleased, but we can, in a more effective way, help them in their suffering and their turmoil. That is kind of the moral framework I work with. I am glad that we are living in a world where a lot of people tend to also think that. I would think, at least in my experience, that most people around me and most people I meet do think that way, even though they don't consistently apply it in every situation. But and if it ever was, or if it ever comes to a position where it's not like that anymore, I think that would be a very bad thing. But I think that's why as well I believe that advocacy and actively keeping that kind of morality going is good. But I do not look at it in an objective sense that what I say is objectively correct. If I ever use that word, I would probably use it colloquially to say that, no, think
Universal,
about it.
like
It's
universal.
causing, yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to clarify that, and yeah.
Okay. So, well, thank you for being here and having this discussion with me. So it was very interesting, and I would love to talk to you again. And so, yeah.